This week, there is a man who is scared he can't die because he has woken up at his own funeral 6 times. Trump has had one of his busiest weeks yet, and big changes could be on the way for America. Israel are being slammed by countries around the world for their latest announcements. India have declared war on man's best friend. And the housing crisis for the young generation in the USA has got so bad that people are now buying their houses on Amazon and Walmart. All of that madness and so much more. Subscribe to the channel if your eyes are still bleeding from last video. And let's stop the yapping and let's go! Okay, let's kick today off with Trump. And I know we haven't really spoke about the Trump politics much lately because we're all a little bit meh with it right now. It feels like that, right? But bro has made so many decisions this week that could actually impact not even just America, but the rest of us around the world, that we got to talk about it, so we're running through it rapid fire. So, on Thursday, Trump's tariffs finally came officially into effect. And I know they've been paused, cancelled, raised, lowered a million times, so it feels like, have they not been already? But no, all of those ones that he announced on the world a while ago, well, now they are officially kicking in. So now we can, I guess, get prepared. And you can always tell that it's happening because, people started freaking out, the media saying we're all doomed. But to be honest, until it actually hits our pockets, I'll just, I wouldn't panic yet because how many times have we been here before? Yeah. But he's also done other things this week. He announced that he's going to be meeting Putin for the first time in about 6 years. And I mean, they act like they're buddies, but I don't know. So on Friday, the 15th of August, which will be right before this week's, I think, BWO Wednesday, so subscribe for that. They're going to both be traveling to Alaska, which is, I guess, kind of interesting. Russia used to own it. America now owns it. And now they're coming together to sort out the war, apparently, in Ukraine. So let's see if they can actually do it. Now, obviously, hearing that a bunch of European countries and Ukraine themselves, well, they're a little bit uncomfortable with this. And fair enough, because this war specifically affects them much more than it affects America. So they're a little bit worried that Trump negotiating a peace deal without them being there is a little bit like, is he going to represent our side the best? So they're basically scared they're going to get a crap deal. But he didn't stop there because he also said that he's going to hold a massive press conference in the White House today where he is apparently going to announce big plans to transform Washington, D.C. and make it more beautiful and more safe than ever before. But to do that, obviously, it's going to require some big changes. The first of which, he said he would be getting rid of all the homeless people. He posted on Truth Social, the homeless have to move out immediately. We will give you places to stay, but far from the capital. And you might be wondering, how are you going to do that? Who's going to round up all the homeless people? Well, do I have news for you? Because he already said that he has proposed the idea, right? He likes to do this. He proposes the idea, not saying for sure, of deploying hundreds of National Guard troops onto the streets of DC. And if that does happen, Washington are gonna freak out. Because remember, they were I think it was 93% that voted for Kamala in the election. That is the most out of any area. So big changes like this on the Republican side probably get him a little antsy. Also, Trump hasn't stopped there this week because reports indicate that Trump is also considering reclassifying cannabis from a Schedule 1, which it currently is, which is the most restricted, to a Schedule 3 drug. Now that would be pretty massive, not just because he's Republican and most Republicans, this is not really one of their talking points, but also because that would be a pretty big shift that would allow broader medical research and commercial access across the country. Currently, it's only legal for, I think, 24 states to use it recreationally. Oh, and one last one. This one is, it's probably not going to affect America that much, but Trump also directed White House staff to move the official presidential portraits of Obama, George W. Bush, and George H.W. Bush to the top of the grand staircase. Huh. That's pretty nice, Trump. What are you doing that for? Why you want to give them some glory? Well, it's apparently not that nice because you find out that the grand staircase is a restricted area and it's not even open for the public tours, so apparently they're never going to see it. This area is reportedly used by First Family, Secret Service, and select staff, so you might not see those portraits anymore. So yeah, busy week for Trump. And if all of these things actually go ahead, pretty big changes for America, on top of the things I'm sure he'll do next week. So let me know in the comments if you support these decisions, you think they're cooked, whatever you want, let me know. Oh, guess what? Me again, because right before going live, Trump has just made another bombshell move. By invoking Section 740 of the DC Home Rule Act, Trump has done something that no president has ever done before. He's ordering the federalization of DC's Metropolitan Police Department. By doing that, it essentially overrides the authority of the mayor of DC and local lawmakers, effectively turning the capital into a federal policed zone, granting the federal government direct oversight of the police and command. If they weren't shook before, they really gonna be shook now. Back to you, Dylan. Also, this week, this man is scared he will never die. And as weird as that sounds, he actually has a good reason. Because believe it or not, he is woken up at his funeral 6 times. I'll be scared too at that point. His name is Ismail Azizi from Tanzania, and he has reportedly been declared medically dead by doctors on 6 separate occasions. But somehow, he's come back to life every single time.
Oh, hell no!
And no one can explain how. In a recent documentary by Aframax, they report that the first time he died was after a workplace accident. He was taken to hospital in critical condition, and soon after, doctors pronounced him dead. Not some randoms off the street, right? Doctors. His body was taken to a morgue while his family, they started making funeral arrangements. But to their bewilderment, he regained consciousness.
Oh, hell no!
And walked out of the morgue onto the street. And that was only round 1. He died again after catching malaria, but this time he made it all the way to the freaking coffin before yet again waking up at his own funeral. Just imagine the chaos that would have caused. Now, this became a literal recurring cycle for years where the 40-year-old Ismail, he would tragically die and then soon after, not be so dead. Death number 3 came after a car accident where he collided with a fuel truck and it put him in a coma. But like clockwork at this point, after being declared medically dead by professionals, he woke up again. And at this point, even the doctors were freaking out. Death 4 was after being bit by a venomous snake, but this time he spent a full 3 days in the morgue. So if this was just him pretending, I don't know how you would spend 3 days in one of those freaking, those sliding out things for 3 days? That would be like the weirdest prank in the world. And considering how long it was, his family were like convinced, okay, Ismail, he's gone for good this time. But no, when they went to collect his body from the morgue for his 4th funeral, woke up again. How? After his 5th death, in which he fell into a toilet pit.
No.
Yeah. His community became convinced that he was either cursed or a real-life ghost. And to be fair, at this point, it's beyond reasonable doubt. So you know what they decide to do? They decide to burn his house down with him in it. Sounds logical. They essentially tried to kill him for the 6th and final time. And guess what? They were successful. Until he woke up again. What the f? And honestly, no one can really explain this at this point. Now he lives in an old, isolated house with no neighbors because everyone's too scared to live next to him. He's a bit of a local legend. And he also apparently can't get a job either because the result of the stigma around him. Brilliant. But, one meeting with JD Vance, bro's cooked. Honestly, if that is 100% true, and I don't know how it could just be like a prank or something, but is that not one of the most insane things you've ever heard? Moving on. Okay, for our next story, we gotta talk about it. Is this the new American dream? Because this video has gone viral this week as showing an instant home manufactured mostly in China, the likes of which are now sold widely in the US, even in places like Amazon and Walmart. But the rise in popularity of prefab homes among Gen Z and millennials is not just an interesting one, it's kind of sad. But not because the instant homes suck, In fact, they look surprisingly nice, and we'll get to that. But because this comes at a time where not only did the number of first-time home buyers in the United States hit an all-time low, but Zillow report that in the past 5 years alone, home values have soared 45%. The NRA report that the median home price is now $422,000. And it gets even worse when you find out that even if Gen Z could afford a home, there simply aren't enough homes to go around. According to data from Brookings, the US market was short 4.9 million housing units in 2023. And for the new housing units that were built, you have to compete with the boomers to buy them, who are absolutely dominating the US housing market right now. They went from representing 31% of all home buyers in the country last year to 42% this year, while millennials did the exact opposite. They dropped from 38% last year to 29% this year. So not only are the boomers outbidding the younger generation for the homes right now, but data shows that they're not just buying one house for retirement. In fact, the median age of repeat buyers is at a historic high of 61 years old. So, what does that mean for the modern American dream? Well, for some, it's looking pretty prefab. And I don't even know if that's the worst thing. Some of them are being sold as low as $20,000. They're very tech heavy. Many are made with eco-friendly materials and minimizes waste, which aligns with the values of today's youth. And with Starlink, remote working, and the stress and cost of city living being an absolute norm nowadays, it's not surprising that these things are picking up a lot of interest right now. But they're not without their drawbacks. They're not a real home, I guess. I mean, just for one, we talk a lot about wild weather nowadays. This thing, wild weather, you're gonna get flushed away. But I guess the question is the fact that tiny instant homes are becoming a serious consideration an alarming indication that something is seriously wrong? Or is it refreshing to see that for some, the American dream in the big old 25 doesn't need to cost $500,000 and decades of debt? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, but moving on. Also, since we last spoke, the state of New York are now being sued by the owners of Peanut, the squirrel. You better remember that. You better. Least you forget about Peanut the squirrel. Oh, and they're being sued for $10 million. And hearing how much that number is, you'd think that people would be like, damn, that's just too far at that point. No. Most people say this is totally justified because everyone loved Peanut. In fact, I remember Alex really having a fun time editing. This one is a personal one for Alex. He loves this. And let's be honest, bro didn't deserve to go out like that. But for those of us who aren't very familiar with the story of Peanut, over 8 years ago, this man, Mark, took in a baby squirrel after its mother was hit by a car. He cared for this squirrel, which he named Peanut. And when he was old enough, he let him go. But instead of the squirrel running away, Peanut returned on Mark's porch the next day with a chunk missing out of his tail. Mark started documenting his journey with Peanut, and all of his videos went hugely viral. Peanut wasn't his squirrel anymore. It was all of our squirrel. And like, no exaggeration, probably the most famous squirrel in the world. So, you can imagine the horror of the entire internet when you hear that one day, remember, this is 8 years that he's been making content with this poor Peanut. One day, out of nowhere, 12 DEC agents raided their home. And euthanize in the state of New York, keeping squirrels and raccoons and stuff like that illegal because of rabies. And they claim that in this whole process, Peanut bit one of the personnel through his gloves. And they were concerned that Peanut had rabies, so they had to test for it. And the way that you test for it, decapitation. However, turns out later, they find out that Peanut never had rabies. And that was unnecessary. So according to the new lawsuit that the owners have now filed, the killing of Peanut was labeled as not due to a fear of rabies, but a senseless act of violence and an obscene demonstration of government abuse. Mark and Daniela claimed that they had suffered emotional trauma and financial loss during this ordeal. So, what do you guys think? Is less about giving the money to them and more about taking it from them?
Give them nothing, but take from them everything!
As a punishment for ending bro? But let me know if you think that they're deserving of $10 million for this or not. Moving on! Also today, Israel are being slammed by the world yet again, because we are getting reports today that 5 Al Jazeera journalists have been killed in an airstrike in Gaza. Now, one of the 5 journalists was Anas al-Sharif, who is actually pretty prominent, and you might recognize his face if you've followed any of the coverage in Gaza, because he is regularly featured in their reports on the actual front line. And the thing is, Israel haven't denied involvement in this. They say that they specifically targeted Anas since he served as a head of a terrorist cell in Hamas, and claimed that he was responsible for advancing rocket attacks against civilian Israelis and IDF forces. Now, these claims so far have been contended as lacking any real evidence. And you couldn't really ask for worse timing, because this comes just days after Israel also announced their plans to fully occupy the entire of Gaza City. In fact, Al Jazeera themselves say that the timing of these attacks were deliberate. They believe that it was, quote, a desperate attempt to silence voices in anticipation of the occupation of Gaza. And in the few days that have passed since they made this announcement, the United Nations have announced an emergency meeting to discuss what's happening. The UK condemned it, Australia condemned it, Denmark condemned it, and Germany, probably in the most significant out of everyone, they announced they will stop arms sales to Israel. And that's pretty significant if you understand the context, because not only is Germany, or I guess was Germany, Israel's second largest supplier after America, of course, but also the Israel-Germany allyship is described often in Germany as one of historic responsibility because, of course, World War II. So them announcing that they're going to stop arms sales was like probably the talk of every world leader in the world. But yeah, things are getting very serious, and it feels like it's back in the headlines all the time. So I will keep you guys updated as this all continues, but moving on. Also this week, India has declared war on man's best friend. Just today, the Indian Supreme Court issued sweeping directions for their capital city of Delhi to remove all stray dogs. And while at first this sounds like a pretty noble initiative to help the homeless animals, there are some serious concerns. Because first, Delhi has not just a couple stray dogs here and there, they have an estimated stray dog population of over 1 million. That's crazy. And so the question is, where are you going to put all of them? Well, the government say that in the space of 8 weeks, they're going to attempt to build animal shelters around the city, each which have a apparent capacity of 5,000 dogs, while also equipping them with sterilization and vaccine facilities. But animal welfare organizations have already raised concerns, saying, you know, that means you have to build 200, from scratch, 200 animal welfare shelters in 8 weeks? And also, not to mention, India is not the first country to have done this. Other countries like Iraq, for example, have as well. And what's ended up with them is Erbil's forgotten dogs. Now, this is what they like to call this massive dog shelter, where they have essentially collected tens of thousands of dogs off of the streets in Iraq and essentially placed them here. And why I put dog shelter in quotations is because some animal welfare groups say that it should be called extermination camps, because there are plenty of reports of these dogs being left with minimal food, water, or even medical care. Hence the name Erbil's forgotten dogs. Now, hopefully, it doesn't end like this in India, and they actually do a better job, and these dogs are better off. But if they are not, we've now spoken about it, and we're all now watching ya, India. But I think with that being said, that's a wrap. So Monday from now on and Wednesday are going to be the rapid fire newses, and then Friday is going to be the week wrap, where you get that hefty thick boy. Love you all. Have a great start to the week, and I will see you on BWO Wednesday. That video.